Welcome back to another episode of the Working Audio Tools podcast, available on YouTube and Spotify and all the streaming platforms, with myself, Ed Thorne, and fellow YouTuber Paul Third. In this episode, we are comparing another mix, and we have a track called Traveling Light by an artist called Joel S. Norman, and these multi-tracks are from the Produce Like a Pro Academy library of multi-tracks, which are available to everyone as well. Let's dive straight in and listen to a short clip of the rough track. This is a rough mix of the track without any processing. And then we'll chat about problems, and then we'll dive into both of our mixes.
The two of them left before the dawn on a Sunday morning, try to make it in time to see the sunrise over the lake. He said, how much do I give and what do I take? As he took him by the hand, something we'll never understand. The two of them sat at the chapel on a Sunday morning to hear the preacher man say it's okay to take these things slow. No matter where you go, I want you to know this ain't no belong to you now. There ain't nothing that you need to do. So won't you come down to the lakeside? Won't you come down by the shady shore? Take the load off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that load more. Lay it down by the lakeside, lay down by the shady shore.
So, Paul, what were the challenges for you on this one?
I mean, it wasn't really that many challenges because it is a really, really well recorded multi-track. I don't know, I just tried to mix it as best as I could, but I think probably the biggest challenge for me this week was I tried a few things out, which many people say, don't ever try things out in a mix, but we're very fortunate that this isn't for a client, so I tried a few things out. I tried a few things out on the mix bus. I tried a few things on drums that Ed had kind of been teaching me about. I tried a few new plugins as well. So I've tried to go more for feel this week because I know that there was a lot of comments with people saying that they kind of felt that my mixes were kind of, overthought, or I was overthinking during the mixes. So I tried a lot to kind of focus on the rhythm section, and I tried to get as much feel as I could while still having like the Paul Third sound where everything is kind of clear and detailed. So yeah, what about you this week? Was there any challenges you had this week?
It's been so long ago since I mixed it, I can't remember. The kick drum was interesting. Was this the track you sample replaced, the entire kick drum?
Yes, because I hated, and it's funny because was it a 47 that I replaced? Was that the only kick that we had? Was it a 47 or was it someone else?
Yeah, something like that, and it sounded like it was mic'd up right on the edge.
Yeah, it was very clicky. It was like
the drum. Yeah, that was a challenge. I'm guessing you incorporated samples, or did you replace it entirely?
Just on the kick, I replaced it entirely, but I replaced them with two Joe Carroll kicks. So I only use Joe Carroll's sample packs. So I used two kicks that I always use, and I added some samples in for the snare. The snare I thought sounded quite nice, but for me, I wanted to have the snare kind of have a little bit of a so I compressed the samples quite heavily using an 1176 fast attack, fast release. I didn't do that on the main snare because Ed has told me before never ever do that, those kind of settings on a snare drum, because again you want kind of a slower attack, because if you have a fast...
I can see the comments happening already.
Well, it's true. I
didn't say never ever.
It's true though.
I just said
because if you think about it, like the way that when you're compressing a snare, right? You're wanting a slower attack because you want to let that transient in. If it's a fast attack and a fast release, it's just going to clamp down on that transient. Where the samples it was more of an effect for me. It was more that kind of the over compression gave for me. But yeah, I didn't do it on the main snare. What about you this week? Did you add any samples in? Did you try and go a little bit more raw, or did you kind of have a typical Ed Thorne hybrid?
I did add samples, 1 or 2 to the kick, 1 to the snare, and I actually sampled the toms.
I was going to do that
on this
I just
one
didn't have
because
time.
I thought they were a bit weak. And we're there saying this; these were great multi-tracks, great recordings. They were, but I think it was a very sparse-sounding kit sound. So I think it required to modernize it a little bit, some beefening, if that's a word.
I think the best term is no. What I should have said. I mean, they're still well recorded to an extent, but I think the production is really good. I think the production on this one kind of mixes itself a little bit. It was very similar to the last Marc Daniel Nelson multitrack that we had. That was called was it
Make My Lonely?
Yeah. So it was very kind of similar to that, where the production is that good and instruments are chosen very well. That I don't know. I found it quite easy to mix in it, but it was just about trying to get that finished pop sound that it's still intimate, because it's quite an intimate song, and it's quite intimate lyrics as well. So I took a lot of time on trying to get the vocals to have enough automation in there, and using the few little tricks, plugins that I've got, just to kind of make the vocals and the lyrics just constantly there, and they're not kind of dipping out at certain parts. So this is Ed Thorne's mix, Traveling Light.
The two of them left before the dawn on a Sunday morning to try to make it in time to see the sun rise over the lake. He said, how much do I give and what do I take, as he took him by the hand. Some things we'll never understand. The two of them sat at the chapel on a Sunday morning to hear the preacher man say it's okay to take these things slow. No matter where you go, I want you to know this sin don't belong to you now. There ain't nothing that you need to do. So won't you come down to the lakeside? Won't you come down by the shady shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that no more. Lay it down by the lakeside, lay it down by the shady shore. 'Cause we're traveling light.
Distrokid sponsor the Working Audio Tools podcast, and you can get 30% off your first year's subscription using the VIP link in the YouTube video description and podcast show notes. Distrokid makes distribution of your music easy with unlimited uploads, and you get to keep 100% of your royalties and earnings. Join over 1 million artists who rely on Distrokid to get their music into Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all other streaming platforms now and in the future. The new Distrokid app is available on iOS. Go and download it from the App Store now. From here, you can upload new releases. You can see your Distrokid earnings and withdraw these earnings. You can view and share your hyperfollow links. You can check your streaming statistics from Spotify and Apple, and even add and edit lyrics and song titles. So keep track of your releases on the move with the new Distrokid app, available on iOS. Download it from the App Store now.
Right, okay, there you have Ed's mix of Travelling Light. I thought it was a good mix. There was only a few things that kind of I thought maybe were a bit misplaced. I felt that the organs were maybe a bit kind of too loud, but again, very subjective. I know you've kind of I could hear you went more for kind of a gospel kind of style approach here, where I've kind of tried to kind of, me being a guitarist, I always have the guitars pretty in the mix and the piano kind of being the main focal point. I noticed that, now Edward, did you steal my autopan trick for the synth? Because it sounds like to me like I could hear a bit of movement in that synth part. Did you?
There's a lot of movement. I think I had the movement set to 100%, stealing from your I want recognition for my creativity. Even though it wasn't my creativity, I just nicked it off you from the last one.
Yeah, I kind of feel that I could hear it. I just feel that now it makes sense now that it's at 100%, because I never set mine's at 100%. It's one of those things.
It's a little overbearing in hindsight.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's definitely heard more than felt. We've heard those discussions.
Yeah.
So I would back that off. I see what you're going for, because I did the same thing. I did the autopan thing on the synth, but mine's is getting very kind of tucked back. I think it was maybe like 30% on the depth, and I've maybe probably got a different setting to you as well. Drums, obviously Paul Third's going to have something to say about the drums, and everybody's going to tell me that I probably don't know what I'm talking about and I should get my ears checked. But the kick and snare wasn't for me here. It was like it's like a doom. The snare was like a doom 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 to me. And I listened to it a few times. I've listened to it on different kind of references as well. I've listened to it on 3 different headphones on 2 separate days. And again, listening again to it there, I can still hear the same thing. So I'm a bit interested on what you did with the drums this week. Is what I'm hearing, but I think what I'm hearing is a very, very short reverb, or is it a gated reverb? I think you've done the same thing when you went for that kind of choom, that choom, choom sound. What do you think it is I'm possibly hearing there?
There is a low sample.
Okay.
There is a short reverb on the main snare. There's a long reverb on the short sample. I don't think I used a gated reverb this time. And I don't think I've made enough of the long reverb, although it comes up in the chorus, but it's definitely felt than heard, that one.
Mm-hmm.
But my goal for the snare on this one was to have a nice kind of boxy sound to get it out of the way of the vocals, and just and quite a bit of ride cymbal. And lots of organ, because I did my homework on Joel's other tracks, and it is quite gospelly, and the amount of ride cymbal and organs he has is, it's like, whoa, it's quite a lot. Maybe more than I would put in, but I actually quite liked it once I got my head around it.
Did you reference Marc's final mix, or did you reference some of Joel's other stuff?
I did reference Marc's final mix. Marc is this is Marc Daniel Nelson. He's a wonderful mix engineer, and some things he just does delightfully well, and he tickles
easy now,
tracks.
easy.
Barely does anything, and just creates these beautifully musical and dynamic mixes. So one thing I wanted to get from his was just how dynamically it swelled. Not quite sure I executed it as well as he did. And I really tried to get the richness out of the piano. Now, for those interested what the stems were like, we had an interesting one this time, because a lot of the stems were actually recorded and then bounced out to tape.
Yeah, I forgot that.
Or recorded to tape, because there was a digital copy and a tape copy. So I think they were to digital and then bounced out to tape. And on that, there was a bit of hiss. So on the snare drum, for example, I RX'd the life out of it. and got rid of a lot of going on in the background. I didn't get round to it with the piano. I can't remember what else it was on. I manually gated the life out of the toms. That's just a standard.
And it's annoying me as well, because if I had more time, I would have RX'd probably everything. But that was kind of almost like a little session in itself, because I would have to go through it. Really, I should have done it in pre-mixing, but I didn't have that much time in pre-mixing. But
it's debatable whether that's character.
Yeah, because
seeing
Mark's mix, I mean, it's definitely there. Like, he's definitely chosen not to RX that out. I mean, and they've purposely, obviously, decided to mix to tape. And obviously, that's an artifact of tape, is, you know, getting like hiss and noise. Listening to all three, Mark's, mine's, and yours, a part of me does want to kind of take it out, because it's probably because I'm not used to it. I'm not used to rock or like pop records like having audible noise like that. But when I heard Mark's and I heard that it was in, I was like, right, okay, I don't feel as bad. In terms of the rest of the track, I felt that it was paced well. I like the piano sound that you got. Vocal wise, again, I think you're getting consistent with your vocals every week. I think you've kind of found yourself a little kind of vocal pocket for the vocals to sit in. Again, verbs and delays I thought were well placed. Again, kind of felt not heard, but when you wanted to hear them, they were there to kind of give you a little bit of space. Backing vocals I thought were well mixed, because what you people watching this won't, or listening to this won't know, is that we were given every single the choir, it was all single vocals, so we had to mix all of that. It wasn't like a stemmed choir, so we had to individually mix them. So I've mixed the choir different to you, and I think on reflection, I think you did a bit of a better job balancing the voices a little bit. I just think you did a better.
Do you want to know what the secret was to that?
Tell me. Was it easy? Don't say it was easy. If it was easy, I'll kill you. Because I spent a wee while
Didn't touch them.
You're joking.
No, put all the faders at... I gain stage everything so it peaks at -12, and then just left them at -10 on all the faders.
Right.
Pan them a little bit, and then did nothing. Just added Sound City Studios from Universal Audio.
No, I was waiting on it.
Give it that
I was waiting on it.
Spacious room sound.
I was waiting on it.
Loved it. That is my go-to choir.
Because I watched your video on it, and I knew this was going to get mentioned. Cause, it's annoying me now. Do you think that it was meant to be that way? Like, they were bounced just so you were just to like not touch them and like kind of mix them as a group? Do you think that was the way it was meant to be?
Were there about 18 tracks?
It was quite a lot. Quite a lot.
Choir. See, if they were mic'd up individually, what I suspect they were just mic'd in front, you know, considerably. They weren't close micing like we're speaking now. Yeah. They weren't singing into it, because then there would be barely any bleed from the other singers. But I got the impression they were just room condenser mics a little bit ahead, and then so it was each mic was picking up, you know, the surrounding singers, and then it was quite a nice blend, because there were one or two little tuning things that stood out, and I thought, if I tune that, it's going to ruin that and phase that. So I just left it, and then the beauty, much like a string quartet or an orchestra, if things are slightly out, it just works as a cohesive instrument. Like a guitar's in tune for 1 second, isn't it, until the neck bends or the room heats up. Same with the piano. It's just it's the cohesiveness of it that is its own tuning. So no, I just left it. Did barely anything.
Oh, so annoying.
Tiny bit of stage one for some
width,
distance. Added to a tiny bit of pre-delay in Sound City Studios. Marg EQ for some top end. That was about it.
Right, okay, that's thoroughly pissed me off now. Thank you very much, Ed. There is never an episode where you don't manage to piss me off in one way or another. Fantastic. Well, that's the one thing you're definitely consistent in this podcast, is pissing me off. Right.
Most of this is off air, by the way, when Paul and I are talking about this during the week, and I'm saying, Paul, can you do this? Can you do that?
Yes, we'll not get into that. Yeah. So we're already like a married couple. We'd probably be going through marriage counselling if we were married. My God. So yeah, I think it's a good mix. I think it's got a good feel to it. I think that it flows nice. The kick and the snare wasn't for me personally. Again, taste. I'm always going to do this with drums, and probably even when I do prefer edge drums, or even if I feel they're really close I'm in, I'm probably just going to say I don't like the kick and the snare, just because it's my my thing in the podcast now. Even if I think it's the best kick and snare in the world, I'll just be like, yeah, I'm not sure, Ed. I'm not sure, mate. Yeah, I would have done it differently. Paul, they nearly null. Yeah, but I don't know. I just prefer mine. So I just.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but I think
Fair
no.
enough,
I would have
fair
liked. I would have liked a little bit more movement in regards to the guitars. I did something a little bit different because I felt that the guitars kind of jump out dynamically a little bit. You could have maybe compressed them, but I don't really like to compress electric guitars that much because they're already compressed just with the way, obviously, like with amp freaking compression. So yeah, but I do it again. Good mix. I think that kick snare, just paltered special. Either way, I'll just say that's my feedback. Good mix, and how about we listen to mine, because I do think mine's is a little bit similar to yours, but with a few little different things, especially in the kick and the snare. Yes, my kick and snare definitely sounds different. So let's have a quick listen to what I managed to cook up.
The two of them left before the dawn on a Sunday morning to try to make it in time to see the sun rise over the lake. He said, how much do I give and what do I take? As he took him by the hand, some things we'll never understand. The two of them sat at the chapel on a Sunday morning to hear the preacher man say it's okay to take these things slow. No matter where you go, I want you to know this ain't no belong to you now. There ain't nothing that you need to do. So won't you come down to the lakeside? Won't you come down by the shady shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that no more. Lay it down by the lakeside, lay it down by the shady shore. 'Cause we're traveling light. Yeah, we're traveling light. The two of them stood holding hands at the edge of the water, with a wondering smile saying, baby, it's about damn time. He took her in his arms, she looked into his eyes. Can you leave it all behind now? Oh yes, I've made up my mind. Take me down to the lakeside, take me down by the shady shore. Take the load up off my shoulder. I don't wanna carry that no more. Lay it down by the lakeside, lay it down by the shady shore. 'Cause we're traveling light. Yeah, we're traveling light. Yeah.
Take your burdens off your shoulder now and lay it all down. Take your
Oh yeah, oh see I will lay it down. Won't you come down to the lakeside? Won't you come down by the shady shore? Take the load up off your shoulder. You don't need to carry that no more. Lay it down by the lakeside, lay it down by the shady shore. We're traveling light. Yeah, we're traveling light. We're traveling light now. Yeah, we're traveling light.
Distrokid hosts a range of visually engaging social media promotion tools to help your release stand out from the crowd. Creative and colorful social media cards incorporate your artwork to help your release stand out. These are free to download and can be highly effective promoting your release. Distrokid also offer mini videos, which are free, short, customizable videos incorporating your artwork and a short clip of your track. And if this wasn't enough, Distrokid also have a tool to create a Spotify canvas generator, which is the video that plays in the background when you're playing a song on Spotify. Simply choose a theme and choose from dozens of different creative artwork concepts. These are free to use and great for engaging your audience, available on Distrokid. For an additional subscription of $8.25 a month, you can get your music videos distributed to Apple Music, Vivo, and Tidal, and you'll keep 100% of your royalties. With DistroVid from Distrokid. All right, that was Paul's mix of Traveling Light by Joel S. Norman. Immediately, what stood out is the snare sound. Yes, we've gone for very, very different snare sounds. I dare say I prefer your kick sound,
Right, yeah.
actually. It just kind of sits a bit more, I won't describe the motion I'm doing off camera, but it just seems to sit a bit more roundedly.
Yeah, I feel like mine's has got a little bit more sub in my kick than yours.
Yeah.
Yours has definitely got the click. That's 100% there. But I felt that when I was listening to your kick, it could have maybe done with just a little bit more. Like what I use DBX subsynth on every kind of mix I do. So, you know what I mean? And I'm using Kick Shaper as well from like my good friend Emma. I use that on the kick samples. As I used it on every kick because we're all samples. And yeah, and I do think that was a trick I like stole from Warren. And it's a thing where like once you get it right, it is just a case of just getting that level just right, where you can just bring in that sub with the DBX, and it just kind of gives it that whoop, 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 that little bit of sub thing, just give you a nice bit of feel. And on this mix, I decided not to high pass the kick because it was something that we learned from the last episode with Streaky, and he was saying just stop taking out all of your low end just because. So I didn't high pass it, and I left that sub in, and then I did a little bit of high passing on the master bus instead of the kick bus. So yeah, that's what I did on that.
Yeah, this was a track I mixed before hanging out with Streaky last time, which was a very comedic episode. Yeah. And yeah, I was, and feel free to troll me in the comments about this, because if you do troll us, it's really good for the YouTube algorithm. So it does us a massive favour. You guys slagging
We're not
us
wet
off.
wipes. Don't worry, we're not wet wipes.
But yeah, I was high passing to 30 hertz on everything. And I have, since doing this mix, taken delivery of some PSI subwoofers, which we'll talk about in the next episode. But I can now hear down there properly and realise the error of my ways, but that's a whole other conversation. With your snare drum sound, there's a lot of snare rattle, which I liked. However, I felt it was quite prominent in the 1 to 3K region, which I think distracts, I don't want to say clashes, but I think it distracts from the vocals.
I get what you mean.
Quite consistently.
No, what it was on this, I changed my approach a little bit because I'm always working at drums to try and get a sound that I like. And I was doing, I think it's this kind of transient thing that I do, the split EQ trick and then clipping it in spiff. I'm going to try in the next mix that I do, instead of boosting the transient part of the snare, to boost the sustain part of the snare. Because I think that, maybe that's what is kind of being so distracting. Is I'm thinking punch, but again, if it's too much transient, it is going to kind of do that a little bit. But I'm thinking,
the thing is, though, I think it was actually the rattle and the sustain of the snare after the hit that was distracting.
Oh, it's okay. It was maybe, obviously, that, as I said earlier, that was the compression thing that I did with the samples where I overcompressed them. So yeah, maybe I went a little bit too much with that. Maybe it was a thing where I was so focused on getting that I maybe overdid it a little bit. Maybe I could have, no, I was about to say low pass the snare, but you're saying it's in the mid-range. So the split EQ trick is about, I'm trying to think where the fundamental was and where I did it with the octave. I want to say it was maybe around 5K I was doing the split EQ thing. But if you're saying it was lower down to your ears, then yeah, I could have just maybe. Well, how would you have fixed that? Would you have EQ'd that kind of region down, or would you maybe have done a bit of sidechain ducking? So every time the vocal was playing, the snare would kind of duck in that kind of frequency clashing region.
Personally, I wouldn't sidechain anything to the snare.
No, I mean the opposite
drum
way. Sorry.
other
So
than-
the snare would duck when that kind of just that one frequency range would duck.
no, because for consistency, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, because the snare
I
is
would
something
just-
different. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have so much of that frequency in,
Right.
so I'm just wondering if you've put it in with the samples and the compression you've used has brought all the top end out.
Right. So do you think it was maybe in the because you've used the same acoustic snare as me. So yeah, it might be the samples because Joe's samples are pre-processed. That's a good one thing I like about them.
Yeah, and they can get quite toppy.
Right. Okay. Is that something
Quite
you've
easily.
noticed? Right. Okay. That's something I'll need to
Yeah.
bear in mind then. Right. Okay. So do you EQ Joe's samples when you use them? Or are you just selective about the samples that you use?
Both.
Right. Okay.
Both, because they've got a blend,
Okay.
and you've basically got to find in the sample what you don't have in the main
Right. Okay.
snare. What you want to avoid is overlapping frequencies,
Right.
because
Okay.
then it's just going to build up and be too much and potentially phase and then make for a thinner sound anyway that you're then going to compensate for with more EQ moves or another sample.
So do you remember? Okay, is it because you're a drummer? So you know, right? If you're going for one of the snare drums, if it's like the Gretsch or it could be the Black Beauty or something like that, you kind of know the characteristic of that snare and kind of where those frequencies are. Is that something you kind of taught yourself?
Kind of, in terms of what the drum is made out of. So Black Beauty is brass,
Right.
a Gretsch is going to be wood, a piccolo might be brass as well. I think there's some steel snare drums in there. These sample packs are available from Drum Sample Shop, by the way. I'm sure Joe will appreciate the shameless plug. So yeah, it's kind of knowing, like, do you want a ringy brass or steel snare drum sound, or do you want a warmer aluminium or wood sound?
Okay.
Wood generally is a bit more thwacky, a bit more throaty.
Okay. Well, no, what? That's something that I'll go away and I'll have a bit of a research. I think I've probably something I need to research a little bit more and think about what actually to kind of learn the sounds of these different snare drums. Obviously, that's a benefit of being a drummer, but
Well, Mr. Third, with your impending launch of your studio, you will no doubt need a drum kit in the studio and no doubt need a wall of snare drums at some point.
know what? This is controversial, but I'm not doing.
I can see Paul thinking already.
I'm
like,
not doing.
"Fuck
I'm not doing
that."
drums in the studio yet. Like I've got a room at the very, very back that was a marijuana farm. Not my marijuana farm. It was their marijuana farm, and I don't know. There's a history behind it, so it's an absolute mess, and it's fucking been ripped out. It's a weird shape, but I'm thinking over time I would do it. So just now, there is no going to be. Trust me, I'm not doing drums in the studio. I hate fucking drums as much as it is fucking else. Having to actually record it and deal with drummers as well. My God. Oh my God, you're really pissing me off this episode, Ed. I'm just thinking of drummers in my studio pissing me off. My God.
And I'm not even halfway through my feedback yet.
Yeah, let's crack on. Again, too much drums because it's Ed. Right, okay. What else? Tell me, right, okay. Make me feel a little bit better, Ed. Make me feel, I like it when you...
No, not yet. So I felt the toms could sound thicker. Again, that's why I use samples, just to beef up the
No, I agree with you there. I agree.
So the snare drum is given the appearance that the mix is quite bright, and then I feel the cymbals, particularly the ride, is adding to that as well. Now, if you'd done your homework on Joel's tracks, you'd actually hear that there's lots of ride in it. So
Right.
I understand why you do that. This is probably the loudest drums you've had in a mix.
100%, yeah.
And I know this is something you've thought of. I wonder if it's maybe come at the sacrifice of the other instruments, combined with the fact that I think the piano is quite toppy. I think you've kind of gone for what I used to do, which is a bit of a low ending, then kind of upper mid-range. I don't want to say curve or tilt, or imbalance, but something that's a bit prominent in the top end where the guitars would normally fill that in for you. I don't feel like the guitars were as hot for you this week, and the piano didn't quite have as much low mids. So I wonder if that's having the drums louder has caused you to balance differently.
I think, the balance is the same because I'm still using stuff like Mix Monolith and then kind of just listening by ear, if that works. So, the process itself hasn't changed. Mix Monolith is still basically kind of doing the same leveling it always has, but I've just brought it up the drums just a little bit more than I'm normally comfortable with. But
maybe it's a presence thing then. Maybe the presence of the snare and the cymbals is giving that perceived loudness.
Yeah, I could maybe on reflection, I would probably agree that I could have maybe backed off on the energy of the snare and maybe not putting as much of that kind of top energy in there. It's hard because when I was first starting out and I was reading all the books, everything I was like reading was like lots of 10k in a snare, lots of 10k in a snare, lots of 10k in a snare. But I think in reflection, what I've done wrong here is that instead of adding 10k to the acoustic snare, I added 10k on the snare bus, which is obviously adding 10k to the samples as well, which is probably added. If you're telling me that normally kind of some of the snare samples are maybe a little bit toppy, that's maybe not been the right thing to do. But if I added the 10k lift onto the acoustic snare, then it wouldn't have maybe been as toppy and bright. I don't know. It's difficult because it's something I always read from like the very start of my journey in audio was 10k,
Yeah,
10k on snare, 10k on
Yeah,
snare.
it's not bad advice. It does add some crack to the snare and life at the top end, especially on cymbals as well. 10k is where that glassy sound is. If you want the Kiss Psycho Circus kind of cymbal sound, which I love. But the danger of adding top end to samples is they can already sound quite digital. Now, Joe's are analog, heavily processed, but analog. But if you do what I often do with the Logic drum doubler and blend samples in that way, is they're all digital and they can sound quite digital quite quickly, particularly in the top ends. That's something to be careful of. But let's move on to some positive stuff, Paul, because I can feel your pain here, and I don't mean to be hard on you. I thought you got a really good bass pocket. I thought you got a better bass pocket than I did. Are you using, what's contributing to that? Is it track spacer, fuser? How are you getting that?
Nah, that was something that I changed a little bit this week. It was more on the mix bus. So originally I had a mix where I just wasn't really feeling that I was getting the bass right in terms of like the tightness of it. I wasn't getting it very tight. Yeah, I'm still doing the same kind of kick bass sidechain thing with fuser, but I went back to using Gullfoss, which is something that I stopped using for a long time. And I went back to Gullfoss Master and I let it do its thing and I set it the way that I used to set it. But I used to never let it do anything in the low end. I used to always kind of take it off the low end, filter that out and take out a bit of the high end because I always felt it was too bright. But for me, I actually remembered how good Gullfoss is dynamically for kind of helping the low end in the track, because what it's doing is it's kind of dynamically, it's expanding and it's kind of reducing as well. And as soon as I added in Gullfoss Master, I was like, that's it. There is the kind of that low end. That low end has a much better pocket, sitting much better. Ozone helps because I do use Ozone, but I wasn't actually doing that much. I was obviously doing the same thing that Ozone does, where it recommends fucking every plugin, and it gives you the low end fucking boost, and it gives you the high end fucking lift.
That's the default setting for master rebalance.
Yeah, clarity and stabilizer.
That's the ultimate pat on the back there if the mid range is fine.
Yeah.
But what I will say about that is when I had the 30 hertz shelf on everything, I was getting a flat mid range, and then I took the shelf down. And then the interaction with the higher frequencies was causing problems in the mid-range on this mix. Probably just because how I'd started it from the bottom. It was a maybe foundation up issue. But yeah, it was interesting learning just how those sub frequencies can interact with higher frequencies in the computer, not even in the room. That's a whole other issue we'll talk about in the next episode.
Yeah, but I think it was not the same kind of. I don't really go that much on bass because you could go wrong very quickly. So in pre-mixing, it was the same technique again, using double tap for my compression and then splitting the bass. So I've got the clean DI for the low end, and I've got the amp for the mid range. Then putting them two together and compressing them separately, and then bringing the two of them together. I think it was maybe just a bit of soothe. There's a preset called demudding the bass that I use, and I normally just leave it on default, and it just kind of normally does it to my ears. It just kind of demudds the bass a little bit, and then I don't know. It was just Gullfoss Master did something, and as soon as I added that in and I listened to the low end, I was like, the bass sounds way tighter there, and the low end just made a little bit more sense. So I'm going to put a lot of emphasis this week on Gullfoss because it was something that worked very, very quickly.
Gullfoss is a plugin I haven't used yet, so I will try and get my head around that. But I've had a few new plugins this week, so we'll talk about those in the next episode because I didn't use them in this mix. Other than that, typical Paul Third vocal sound, spot on, just sweet and right in the spot. Guitars were good, and I noticed you mentioned with you had some movement with the guitars. I noticed some of the guitar swells moving. That is a nice touch. I wish I'd done that. There's always something in your mixes I wish I'd thought of, but you're the creative one.
I know.
Overall, I'd say reasonably similar mixes. I'd say all three mixes from you, myself, and Marc Daniel Nelson would pass. As always, personal preferences and minor taste issues between the three of us there, I would say.
I've got one thing. Sorry, before we go, right? I used, and this was a plugin that Ed got me because Ed was actually, I can't remember where you were, but it was like, I was at a dinner or something. I was at like an event.
Strong Room Studios with MSM
Yes.
the other week.
So I actually used the Schwab Digital Gold Clip on this mix. I did it before Flatline too. And I did quite like it. I used it after God Particle and I played about with it for a good half an hour and I liked the setting I was able to get and I liked the sound of it. Did you use it?
I haven't used it yet, no. And I've been using God Particle cautiously lately and just trying to find a balance between Ozone, God Particle, not using the limiter but using the parallel processing and then L2 and just trying to find a limit and playing with how far I can push it.
You should try Flatline too, mate, honestly. See the hybrid new feature that they've put in is basically them trying to kind of take on Ozone's maximizer. And that on it, mate, it's one of the most transparent like clipper limiters that I've ever used. I was shocked when I pushed it. I think it was -9.5. I think I ended up pushing mines to, and I was like, "Oh my god, I could push this even further." And because I wasn't hearing the distortion. I was feeling hearing a lot of transparency
on Flatline or Gold Clip.
Flatline too.
Okay.
So I basically I've got Gold Clip going into Flatline on like the actual master channel. So what Gold Clip's doing is it's just adding in a little bit of extra compression, a little bit of extra clipping, not a lot, but that gold processing, it's like it reminds me a little bit of what Waves MV2 does. You know, where it brings up the low end information, not low end, but the low level information.
Yeah, speaking to Ryan about that, there is a lot going on under the hood on that plugin.
You should try it out. I was quite impressed with what I was able to do with it, and I do feel it helped Flatline 2 because it meant that Flatline 2 wasn't having to do as much. It does imprint a colour. Now, I definitely didn't use the classic mode because I was like, okay, I don't want to add too much distortion to this, but the modern features that that plugin's got is pretty good. And yeah, you don't need to have it doing much. I think I've got mine's maybe doing like a dB of clipping, which is very similar to actually how Jason Joshua uses the God Particle limiter. It's just like he sets the input gain to like -5 dB and the limiter is set to +5 dB. So it's just there to catch the peaks. So it's obviously, there'll be some form of clipping underneath, and you know, because that's when he's on about transients and it keeps the transients intact and stuff like that, which is very similar to what Gold Clip does. So yeah, it was interesting, but yeah, I just thought I'd add that in there just because it was something else that I used this week. So again, experimenting all the time. Me and Ed can't help ourselves. We're always trying out new things. But yeah, there you go. I am happy with this mix. I think you're happy with your mix, and that is genuinely, Ed, if we can have every week like this, I think we'll be much happy campers. So yeah, I'm happy to sign off on a good note this week. It has been emotional.
On that ginger bombshell.
Oh, fuck you, Ed. Fuck you. Know what? Fuck you. Know what? Bye-bye.
Finally made him quit. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, theys and thems, everyone in between, thank you for listening on that bombshell. We will be back next week. We don't have a guest, but here he is. But we are going to be talking about gear acquisition syndrome, and I've had some interesting studio upgrades which have blown my mind and basically put me back to square one. I know nothing, and we'll talk about it next week. It's been emotional. See you next time.